Recording is on. Make sure I don't click it off like I did that one time. All right, I want to share another screen before we get started. Oops, there we go. Why is it not? There we go. Okay, so when you go into that tiny URL for the OFLA meetups, this ODE OFLA meetups, this is the box I'm sure you're familiar with if you've gotten here to get your contact hours. So just as far as the schedule, so you know, we are actually today is like the last, it's like the last one that's open to everybody. It's kind of sad. I've had so much fun with everybody this summer. I'm like, what are we going to do? So today we're on number 14. Tomorrow is just an open forum for beginning teachers in years 1 to 5. Not that anyone can't come if they want to, but we're really going to focus on the needs of beginning teachers tomorrow. And then as far as the ODE, if you look in the gray box, as far as the ODE OFLA summer series, that's going to be it for now, because we figure everyone's going to be going back to school. You know, people will go back and actually see what worked and didn't work. So we figure what we'll do is mid-September or so, once everyone's back and has sort of seen what's going on, we'll see, you know, it'll be a lot more specific about what's working, what's not working. So today is the last official open one for anybody. Tomorrow's for beginning teachers. However, just in case, you know, you're going to be feeling lonely or anything, next week, if you look in the yellow box, ODE, we're doing a big 3-day event called Teaching in Uncertain Times. And it's all the content areas are doing it. And if you click any one of the 3 links that are on here, it'll take you to the ODE page with all the sessions. So you'll see, and it's all about remote learning. And so you'll see that like day 1 has general sessions that will apply to everyone. And then day 2 and day 3, we do breakout rooms. And so we're still gonna have more world language breakout stuff with OFLA helping us out. So if you're like, you know, going through withdrawal next week and you want to do some more, we'll have some more breakout sessions. So if you click on any one of the links in the yellow box, all 3 of them are the same, it'll take you to the schedule for next week. And the same thing, we'll record those, you can get contact hours, etc. So just a heads up on that one. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen here. So for today, today's session, oh, do I have the wrong title for today's session? Okay, I'll go in there and I'll go in and fix that, Darlene. Thank you. While Brian's speaking. So today's session, there's actually 2 handouts for today. I don't know now if you still want to, if you want to put those in.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you. So Ryan and I, Ryan Works, my colleague here, he'll start here in a second. We're, there we go. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to do sort of a half and half session. Ryan's going to talk about some classroom management techniques and strategies, et cetera, and some of the research, et cetera, for remote learning. And so and then the second half is we're going to take that and really talk about what does it look like in the classroom? How do we build community? All those ideas that we're sort of like, what am I going to do when I actually get in there? So you have 2 handouts to choose from today. The first one, the main handout, the one that ends with WLC 1, World Language Culture 1, that's the handout that Ryan's going to be showing on the screen that has the notes. The second handout, the WLC2, is the interactive one that has all the ideas. So the interactive one also has Ryan's notes, but it also has boxes in there for some ideas that I already populated it with. And then after Ryan's half of the presentation, we'll do a lot more share out. So you can, if you just want to look at Ryan's handout, just pick the number 1 hand, the WLC1. If you want to look at the one with the ideas that we're going to look at second, pull that. But either way, you'll get the same information. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Ryan. And so Ryan's going to go for to about 1:45, and I got you on the clock, Ryan.
All right, give me just a second here to share my screen. Hopefully it will come up. And it did. Good. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Welcome Back meetup. As Kathy said, my name is Ryan Wertz. I serve as the lead consultant for world languages and global education at the Department of Education. And I get the great pleasure of working with Kathy on the world languages team. Before I get started today, I do just want to say thank you, as we always do, to our friends at OFLA for helping to facilitate these meetups. It's been a really great partnership throughout the summer. I noticed we had a couple of the OFLA board members on today. I just want to thank them for sharing their Zoom platform with us, for expanding the Zoom platform so that we could get more of you on these calls with us, and really just for making this happen with us. We truly appreciate the collaboration. Since the start of school is now looming on the near horizon for many of you, today we wanted to take a look at some practical strategies for classroom management and building community, specifically in an online or hybrid learning environment. As Kathy mentioned, I'm going to kind of do the more formal presentation today during the first half of our 90 minutes together, and then she is going to spend some time with you afterwards, kind of debriefing the presentation and building some additional strategies. So proactive classroom management has long been a topic of great interest to me. My interest in this topic goes all the way back to even before I became a formal teacher, when I was tasked with trying out a new environmental education curriculum and a new agricultural education curriculum with 1st through 6th graders in the one-room school in the village where I worked in Panama as a Peace Corps volunteer. And it was expected that I would differentiate instruction in these two curricula across all 6th grade levels. And as with any specials teacher, apparently anywhere on the planet, the regular classroom teacher fled the school when it was time for me to start teaching. So I truly learned about managing a very challenging classroom through trial and error, and swore that if I ever became a teacher back home in the US after my Peace Corps service, that I would be sure to better prepare myself ahead of time to be a better behavioral manager. So that commitment to being a better classroom manager was still there when I did return to the US, when I became a pre-service teacher, and then when I actually began working in elementary, middle school, and high school language classrooms. So since those very early days in my career, I've had an occasion to present on this topic at state, at regional, and national conferences. I've also been invited to speak on this topic as a guest lecturer with many of the Ohio State University's past pre-service teacher cohorts. And today I'm very happy to speak on this topic again. And I truly hope that you find something useful in what I have to share with you today. So just very quickly, I have two basic objectives I'd like for us to work towards over the course of our 90 minutes together today. First, I'd just like everyone to become more familiar with research-based best practices in proactive classroom management for a blended or a totally online learning environment. And that word proactive is very important today. This is all of the what do I do beforehand, before the kids show up on day one, to be prepared and ready. So we want to be thinking ahead today. And then of course, you know, most of you have been classroom teachers for a long time. So we want to build on your prior experiences as a seasoned classroom manager. And we just kind of want to rethink or retool many of those techniques that have worked just fine in the regular classroom environment for the online or the hybrid environment. And like Kathy, I like to share the resources that I am working from. I actually conducted a rather extensive literature review of the most recent research that's out there on proactive classroom management, specifically best practices that have been recommended most recently for use in an online or blended learning environment. And if you take a look at these, I think the oldest resource on the page is 2017. Many of these are research articles that have come out either last year or most of them this year. I was really interested, what are teachers saying now? What are researchers finding now to help us as we transition back into an online or a hybrid environment for the coming school year. So you can access these resources at your leisure through that link that I know that Na has posted on the up on the web. All right, so I'd like to start off with a poll question or two. And the first poll question here, in a word, how are you feeling about your ability to engage students and manage their behavior in a blended or in a totally online classroom environment? So this is my very first moment ever using Mentimeter. Bear with me here. And we'll see if I can make this work as well as Kathy does in her presentations. All right, so you've got the code up at the top. If you go to www.menti.com, either on your phone or in another browser window, you can enter that number, 374259, as the code. And you can put in a word. And let's see what words come up here. We're going to make a Wordle with everything that people have to say. Not seeing a lot of positive words there yet. Come on, be confident. You have been classroom managers before. And you did it. You survived the spring, right? So anxious, unsure, and certain. Uncertain, nervous. Those seem to be the big words. Overwhelmed, ridiculous, there's a good one. Weak, inadequate, semi-confident. There, we're getting into the positive territory there with semi-confident. Open-minded, that's a great attitude to take into all of this. Cautiously optimistic, all right, so that's good. Some of us are going to take a survivalist approach. That's often. Some of us are still iffy or unsure. And we've got an excited. Good, I'm glad someone's excited about all of this. If I were going back into the classroom today, I'm not sure how excited I would be. I think I would be a ball of nerves myself. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you for sharing. Very interesting and not totally unexpected what I'm seeing there. Okay. So I think I need, as Kathy explained to me, I need to escape from this. And then I need to go back and reload my, see if it does it. I need to bring up my second one. All right. Let's do this one next. Same thing, you may have to refresh your browser and go back to www.menti.com. And then do enter this new number. All right, and you can, in just a few words, this is an open-ended response. Just a few words, what do you anticipate will be your greatest classroom management challenge or challenges as the new school year begins? A lot to do. Attention span, student accountability, motivating students, keeping them engaged, keeping them participating, holding their attention, monitoring in person and remote at the same time. That's going to be really challenging. Keeping socially distant during target language communication. I'm assuming that's for the people who are actually teaching in person. Establishing a good rapport. That's one of the key principles in any good classroom management plan. Holding students accountable, building community. Let's see, motivating them. What am I going to do with my challenge students? Yeah. Again, keeping their attention, engaging them while they're online. It's one thing when we've got them in our classroom, in the palms of our hands, right? It's another thing when you're trying to do all of this over the internet, right? Working in a place where no requirements are placed on students, all right? So we're going to talk about what kind of requirements can then you place on them when you are together in the online environment to make this work. Managing time, transitions. Transitions are key in classroom management. If you give them some downtime or you're scrambling to get your act together, that's when you tend to lose it. All right, changing back and forth between face-to-face, hybrid, and remote. And I like that one. I don't even know yet. And that may be the case. There may be some scenarios and some circumstances that you have yet to face that just simply didn't come up when you were trying to forge your way through this back in the beginning, back in the spring. And I see the answers keep going. How am I going to monitor cheating? How am I going to ensure equity? Engagement has come up many, many different times. How am I going to engage them? How am I going to guarantee their social emotional learning? All important at this time when our students have so many needs beyond just their basic learning needs in the classroom. All right, and this will keep going for a while, but I know Kathy's holding me to the clock today, so I'm going to escape this, but I encourage you to keep going because I am going to collect these answers. And let me get back to my presentation here. And thank you for your willingness to share and to put yourselves out there. That's hard to do sometimes, especially right now when you're feeling really overwhelmed. So, all right. So I know you're feeling overwhelmed, but I really, I can't emphasize enough that the vast majority of you on this call have spent some time in the classroom already. Many of you have been managing students for years. And you already have the bulk of the expertise you need to become a highly effective classroom manager in a blended or completely online learning environment. So right up front, I just want to recognize your expertise. And then I want to help you take what you already know and can do and leverage it to ensure your managerial effectiveness is adequate in your new blended or online reality. This session wasn't designed to help you acquire basic classroom management skills. I'm operating on the assumption that if you're already a classroom teacher, you have some, and that if you're a pre-service teacher, you've already been there and covered those and are ready to start employing them. Rather, I want you to rethink your skill set and how to use it, and then together, along with Kathy, when I'm done presenting here, I want to help tweak it with you before your new school year begins in such a way that will allow you to be proactive in your preparations and then ready to go for anything that might possibly occur. Let's take away some of that uncertainty that we were talking about in our mentee here just a second ago. All right. A lot of you, when we were creating that Wordle, I saw that word engagement coming up over and over in that second mentee question, rather. There was definitely some current concerns on your part about engaging your kids. So I want to start today as a perfect segue into my first primary slide here. I'd like to begin by discussing some of the best practices that research suggests will help guarantee optimal conditions for instruction and learning in either a blended, which is also sometimes called a hybrid learning environment, or if you happen to be teaching at the beginning of the year in a totally online environment. As we talk about classroom management, what we are really talking about in terms of the big picture is our teaching presence. And it shouldn't come as a big surprise that a strong teaching presence goes hand in hand with a very high level of learner engagement. Any discussion of engagement in a blended or totally online environment begins with you considering the platform that you'll be using to organize and facilitate access to information and learning. So from the first moment a student, or maybe a parent or caregiver,
let's go eat first,
logs into your learning management system or your LMS portal, whatever platform you might be using, and that could be Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, or something else, their attention and their senses should be instantly engaged. Take some time to learn about the different features your learning platform provides and employ them creatively in order to embed interesting content into your entry platform in a fun and eye-appealing way. Also, make your learning portal easy to navigate. think about features that make different web pages you go to easy for you to navigate. And then try to employ those same kinds of features in the design of your own LMS pages. Ask some of your colleagues or some friends to try out your entry portal and navigate to your different pages or features, and then gather and use their feedback to make improvements before the first student ever logs in. The experts also recommend creating different spaces in your portal for different purposes. For example, consider creating an embedded online space for students to come together socially outside of formal instruction times with you. The literature on proactive classroom management in a blended or online environment can't seem to emphasize enough the need for designing engaging and user-friendly learning spaces. If having an engaging learning space wasn't emphasized enough, the research also drives home the importance of being organized is one of the single most important aspects when preparing for your year and proactively managing any classroom or learning environment. Being meticulously prepared and organized may be the very best proactive management technique of them all. And let's be honest with ourselves. Students know which of their teachers are well organized, which teachers transition seamlessly from one activity to the next, and they respect them for it. And if we're also being honest, let's acknowledge that students can become pretty frustrated and even unruly when things aren't well organized and they're confused. The experts recommend that you find ways to provide resources and responses to questions so that learners can find them easily. If you proactively organize information and you think ahead of time and anticipate and provide responses to frequently asked questions, students will be much more likely to work through any momentary confusion that they may experience. And don't just make organization practical, make it user-friendly as well. As we leave this side, let's keep in mind the quality of your professional life and how it will be much better if you're organized, and that if this carries over into your students' lives as a result, how much better their lives will be also. Everyone that seems to write about these topics agrees that your organized example could have far-reaching effects on your own learners. All right, moving on. My next slide, I'd like to focus on building community. Really, this is one of the main things we need to do at the onset for this year to come together with any hope of success. So creating a sense of community is always an essential aspect in any classroom, but especially during this time of COVID, it takes an even greater level, or it takes on an even greater level of importance as you attempt to create a unified and cohesive learning environment when your students may be scattered all over the place. It's really critical in an online environment that you take the time to build rapport with your students as well as among your students. Many teachers feel a great sense of pressure to just jump right into teaching the standards. But the experts all agree that significant time taken at the start of the year to create an open and safe learning environment built on mutual respect will have a profoundly positive effect on how you and your students perceive your virtual learning environment as a community throughout the rest of the year. So if anyone asks, you can tell them that Ryan Wirtz at the Department of Education said you should spend some time building rapport with your students before you go hog wild teaching the standards. All right. It's also important to build in times for students to socialize and to just be kids. For example, try opening your synchronous learning sessions maybe 5 to 10 minutes early if your schedule permits, to allow kids to get their socializing out of the way before you're trying to lead some type of an instructional activity. In addition to this, help your students stay connected outside the virtual classroom by providing other mechanisms for them to interact virtually. For example, by embedding a blog, a classroom chat forum, or other classroom-friendly media into your learning platform. And you know what your school will and will not allow. Although I'm going to talk about the importance of supporting your learners' social emotional needs here in just a bit, in closing out this slide, I do want to point out now that one of the primary ways that we can attend to those social emotional needs is by establishing a warm and safe, effective learning environment where a sense of community is allowed to flourish. All right. A proven proactive management technique in any learning environment is to actively involve your learners in establishing the class norms, both the behavioral norms and the procedural norms. Research shows us that learner participation in setting class norms creates buy-in on their part. They're much more apt to follow their rules than to follow your rules. So as you're working together to establish your norms, you should subtly guide your students towards the behaviors and priorities that you know need to be put into place. All right, it doesn't have to be a free-for-all. You can have some behind-the-scenes control and push them gently towards the norms and expectations that you feel would be most appropriate in your classroom. But let them feel that they're a part of that process too. As far as the different types of norms that are needed, first, establish norms for communication and interactions both on and offline, including all video conferencing scenarios. Second, put into place norms for office hours and other interactions outside of formal class time. Next, you want to create norms for students who are physically present in a classroom following your school or district's policies that align with health department recommendations. Good luck with that with the little ones, that's all I can say. Fourth, make mutual respect and courtesy focal points in both your online and your in-person classrooms. And finally, be proactive and teach about plagiarism before students ever have an opportunity to engage in it. Be sure to give plenty of examples so that students understand specifically what it is and the forms that it can take. You want to be sure to post your main classroom rules and norms both physically in your actual classroom if you're going to be working there, but also post them prominently on the classroom landing page of your online platform as well. And make sure you communicate your norms and expectations to parents and caregivers in a timely manner as well. When I was a teacher, I actually had a behavioral contract that I signed, my students signed, and their caregivers signed. And we went back and referred to that over and over throughout the year. So it was very infrequent that anyone came to me and said, oh, but I didn't know that was a norm in your classroom, or I didn't know that my kid was supposed to be doing that in your classroom. You had their signature right there to show them that they had read and signed that, or at least hopefully they had read before they had signed it. Finally, make sure that you also spend ample time developing your consequences for failure to follow the norms. For example, think ahead of time what your response will be if students are breaking the norms or interfering with the class. For example, will you interrupt a misbehaving student? Or will you send him or her a private message? Will you mute them? Or will you just wait patiently until you have everyone's attention? So having proactively planned responses for potential misbehaviors, thinking about these things ahead of time, this is essential for success in an online environment. It's as essential as establishing your class norms in the first place. All right, moving on. When you establish norms and routines, make sure students and parents are fully aware of them. That was the message from the last slide, right? It's important to expect that students follow them. both in person in your classroom, but also when they're working with you online. It's equally important for you to be consistent in your response when they don't follow the established norms. Learners correctly interpret any lack of consistency on your part as a weakness to be exploited. Let students know about consequences and penalties up front, and then stick with your word. You will have students who don't meet your expectations in the online environment, just as you always have in the traditional classroom. So have a plan in place for when this happens and be consistent in the enforcement of those norms and expectations. For example, a click is a click, whether you're in your classroom or you're in the online environment. And we know that clicks require managing. Your class clown can be just as disruptive on camera as they can be in person, and they'll also require managing. Unfortunately, online instruction does not provide any free passes from these types of scenarios. You've got to continue to be vigilant and prepared to act at a moment's notice. And by being fair and impartial when you do have to act, and by applying your rules and expectations evenly or consistently, you will increase your students' respect for your authority and improve the overall learning environment. Having strong routines is one of the things that makes sense to kids, that are important in any learning environment, but they're especially important when you can't be present with your students on a daily basis. Most kids, especially younger ones, take a lot of comfort in the routines that we build with them. So the proactive classroom manager knows how critically important it is to establish and frequently reiterate routines. And beyond that, it's not enough to just verbally explain a desired routine. You have to model and even overtly practice those routines. And sometimes you have to practice them or model them repeatedly. Simplifying routines is wise, and it's especially wise in an online or a blended environment. How your students will submit their work, how they'll receive feedback, should be consistent throughout the year. Also, maintaining some consistent patterns with the work assigned each week will help your students establish their own routines at home in terms of handling or doing that work. When I began presenting this afternoon, I started off by imploring you to create a highly engaging landing pad for learners to access the online elements of your classroom. Along this same grain, you need to plan lessons that are relevant and highly engaging as well. We've been talking all summer about the things that you can do to make that happen. And those lessons need to be rigorous, and they need to lead to the use of higher order thinking skills whenever possible. Your lessons really need to cultivate student ownership and learner autonomy by providing a variety of learning options, for example, a choice board, as well as supports. And that may take the form, for example, as a bank of learning strategies from which your learners can choose. As you plan, purposely include ways to involve everyone. Note who's participating regularly, and then actively work to include those learners who are not. This is something you've been doing in your classrooms all along. We need to be hypersensitive, though, in the online environment to those students whose presence is not being made strong. And then remember that moving to an online or a blended environment that doesn't require you to lower the bar for learners in any way. You need to continue to have high expectations for every single one of your students and utilize all the elements of universal design that we've been focusing on all summer long to provide differentiated learning opportunities that allow them to achieve the established learning objectives.
Ryan, you have about 8 minutes, just so you know where we are.
I'm actually in my final stretch here. I just got
okay.
about 3 more slides to go. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about clarity. In an online environment, everything needs to be crystal clear. as clear as you can possibly make things to your students. As you implement those carefully crafted lesson plans, clearly state the goals and objectives for each learning session. As always, those goals should be SMART goals. In other words, they should be specific, they should be measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. At the beginning of each synchronous class session, take time to go over the agenda of activities that you have planned at the onset in order to demystify that session's learning path for your students. Also, include the learning goals in the written descriptions of all activities that have to be completed asynchronously by your students. One of the recommendations we heard the other day in a session was to have both written and recorded instructions whenever possible when we're giving our students something more complex to do. Another thing you want to do at the beginning of each class session is to be sure and minimize any potential distractions to help your learners focus on the day's objectives. You also want to create clear attendance requirements with instructions on how to communicate absences in a timely manner. Unfortunately, going online does not excuse you from your attendance keeping responsibilities. Also, determine the use of webcams during synchronous online learning sessions. For example, is it required that everyone have their webcam on? Be clear about those kind of things. Additionally, determine what the expectation will be around being muted or unmuting during class. And for example, will that muting or unmuting expectation be the same or different during discussion time or during group work? Finally, how will students indicate that they have a question or a comment? Will they only use their voice, or will they use the chat feature like we do on these meetups by writing the word share or something equivalent in the target language? These are just a few examples of the myriad ways you have to think ahead of time and be absolutely clear about when interacting with your students. So all of this brings us back to teacher presence, that broad topic that I mentioned earlier in this session. When you bring up the topic of teacher presence, most educators know what this looks like and what they need to do in the actual classroom to be perceived as the in-charge learning leader and the behavior manager. But what does this look like in an online environment? Basically, you need to discover ways to be as present and strategic virtually as you are when you're teaching class in person. You also need to be sure to find ways to allow your personality and your sense of humor to come through clearly to your students. You know, if you're working with students that you've worked with in the past, you have the luxury of them already knowing you. But if you're working with a brand new group of level 1 students, for example, or this year's new group of kindergartners, they don't have the benefit of having been physically with. So you need to broadcast in some way or another your personality to help them know you. In fact, broadcast journalists employ all kinds of vocal and expressive techniques when they're on camera. And you, as an online teacher, would do very well to follow their dynamic lead. One way to heighten your presence is to balance your video or recorded presence with real-time communication, as much as your instructional model will allow. Also, continue to be present through frequent check-ins and your availability during your posted office hours, even as you also work to build learner self-sufficiency. Additionally, be strategic when grouping learners, and please do group your students frequently. Learning online from home does not at all need to equate to a death sentence of learning everything individually in isolation. All right? And with regard to your interactions with students and their interactions with each other, balance large group and small group learning opportunities and try to virtually sit in on small group work sessions as often as you possibly can. Finally, keep a strong presence with parents and caregivers. Hold virtual open houses, schedule periodic parent update Zoom sessions, and continue to contact them to share successes and challenges, just as you did before the pandemic hit. Communication is the key to any relationship, no matter where or how it takes place. If you reflect back on a personal long-distance relationship that you have experienced in your lifetime, think about the time and energy and intentionality you had to put into growing and maintaining that relationship. Well, an online relationship with your students requires the same intensity and intentionality of communication to be productive and successful. So take every opportunity to communicate with learners clearly and regularly. Use different ways to contact your learners. Some researchers suggest you should use one-on-one check-ins sparingly so that when you do contact students this way, you have a bigger impact. Others simply suggest that checking in one-on-one as often as you can is the best recommendation. You may have to find the balance that works best for you and your learners. Be sure you still communicate with other teachers of your students who misbehave in order to try and gather information about the possible underlying causes for their bad behavior. And then finally, don't shy away from difficult conversations with your students. Sometimes online teachers exhibit a tendency to avoid difficult issues when they occur. You should try and stay on top of things as they arise and take appropriate and immediate action. Use positive reinforcement techniques as often as possible. Use praise when students do something right, but conversely, be careful not to praise them when their behavior or their work is not acceptable. As you well know, some students you may have to look really hard to find something positive to celebrate for them, but do find it and do praise them. The results can be well worth the effort. And with younger students, point out or praise a model student. For example, I like the way Michaela keeps remembering to raise her hand icon and waits for me to call on her instead of just blurting things out. Good job, Michaela. And finally, also continue to contact parents to sing students' praises and share their successes. I can't tell you how often a student would come to my class the next day and boast to his or her classmates how Senor Wirtz called home last night to say what a good job they had done. All right, and Kathy, I promise this is my last slide. I want to end my part of today's meetup by focusing in just a bit more on parents and caregivers. Just as they say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes the active involvement of parents and caregivers to educate a student. This comes out over and over again so clearly in all the research. First, I want to remind you to be empathetic with them, just as I hope that they will remember to be empathetic with you and when they contact you. Like so many of you, they're going to be trying to balance their own personal and professional lives with overseeing learning for their kids. And parents, just like teachers, are feeling incredibly overwhelmed by our current situation. Being kind and showing them some understanding, compassion when you interact with them will go a long way in building the type of parent-teacher relationship that will be beneficial to you over the course of the year. As always, be professional with them and find ways to involve them in the learning process. And as mentioned previously, when communicating with them, always share positive aspects about their kids, not just the negative ones. When parents or caregivers are angry, and tempers are definitely more prominent these days than ever, please remain calm, be dispassionate, and be factual. Don't ever let your emotions interfere with your ability to leverage assistance from those who can best provide it. Because communication is so important, set up a class webpage, a class newsletter, a weekly progress report, a class blog, a class Facebook page, or some other appropriate medium of communication. And then, and this is important, update it regularly, remembering that parents use these tools to support you at home. As I conclude, I want to remind everyone not to be afraid of parents or other caregivers. this is a good word of advice to any of you who may be first-year teachers. Parents and caregivers can truly be some of your best allies. If you communicate clearly and regularly with them, if you accentuate the positive, and if you show them that you value their input, the assistance that they can provide from home can be absolutely invaluable. All right, so just 3 minutes over. Kathy, I don't know if we want to take time now for discussion and questions, or if you want to move right into your portion, because you're really going to be handling what I think a lot of people probably are asking about, or maybe have been asking about already. You tell me what works best for you.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
think what I'll
stop
do
sharing.
is, I think I'll do is go ahead and go into the examples, because I think that's where some of the questions will come up. I'm going to go ahead. If you have the second handout, the interactive one, I'm going to share my screen with that. But I want to look at, I think Megan just put a really good question. And I put, and Megan, I hope I wasn't trying to be flip. It's like the $1 million question, where Megan's like, how do I be awesome online and teach my students, and I've got kids at home? And you know, there's no there's no easy answer. Does anybody want to, I mean, some of us had to do this in the spring. I mean, I wasn't teaching a class, though I was working from home while my son was still in school, so it's a little bit different. But does anyone want to throw in the chat box about what are you doing if you're a parent and you're trying to teach your class online, especially because now a lot of teachers know that, yes, we're going to be online, and you're trying to do your own students or your own children. Does anybody have any ideas? And I almost feel like that's what we're going to do in our September one, is sort of be like, okay, what's working? Because I think there's no easy answer to that, Megan. It's the hybrid issue, not that we're just, yeah, so it's the hybrid one where you're in class. Yeah, I honestly, I don't have an answer, Megan, because I don't think any of us have had to do it just yet. Make your kids part of the world language class. I'm looking at some of this. Let's see. I try to be a different part of the house. I make sure I know my daughter's timetable. Yeah. So anyone who, if I know, like I said, it's hard to have an answer already because we haven't even started this yet. But find a really good, entertaining TV show. Yeah, for like an entire year. So if you can think of ideas, throw them in the box there, because I know Megan's not the only one going through that. A lot of people are. Let's and Megan, I'm totally not ignoring you. It's just I don't know if any of us really have the answer to that until we actually get started. Let's look. I'm just going to take the interactive handout that Ryan had. I'm sorry, the handout that Ryan had, and then I just put the pictures in, his slides in there, and I put some ideas in here. But I'm going to be totally transparent. I went to, let me see if I can find her page. Actually, where is it? Leslie Gran for Lang. I mean, Leslie is amazing. So if you go to her homepage, this Gran for Lang, and she has right on here resources for the shift to online blended learning. And you can see she's got setting up your classroom, this communicating your expectations. Someone had asked about the norms, ideas for the first week. Leslie has tons and tons of ideas. So that's a lot of the things that I put into our handout. I totally just stole from Leslie. So I put her, I'm trying to go back and find that handout. There we go. I made sure I put Leslie's link in there. But I think the biggest thing that Ryan said that we want to look at is that we already know what to do. I mean, unless you've never taught before, we already know how to run our class. So what I tried to do when I set up the chart, and again, I made it so if you want your own copy, go ahead and download it. But so you can edit it yourself. So I just sort of divide it into characters, like a characteristic or category, sorry. Like the first one, how do I make my physical classroom engaging and welcoming? And so I just put on things on the left, things that I know we do as teachers. And I just brainstormed on the right about, oops, keep messing up my screen here, about how do you adapt this to an online classroom? So like bulletin boards and realia, because I know like some teachers have been telling me, they're like, oh my gosh, I have all this realia, but now that we're doing, if you're going to be live and you have the 6-foot distance, like you have to pretty much empty out your classroom of everything. So some ways of how can I do that online? If you have workspaces, I am going to actually open today up with, you can put in the chat box, or Megan, I'm looking at your comments in the chat box as you're talking. If anyone wants to share, because I think since we can't all edit the document together, but look, you can look through the document and you see some of the things I have in here. Does anybody want to share? Just type share in the chat box about what you're doing to your online classroom to make it welcoming. So you can either put it in the chat box, or if you want to share, you can go ahead and click on the mic. So what are you doing to make your online more engaging? Virtual background, a Bitmoji. I've seen this Bitmoji classroom is really popular. It looks like it might take a lot of time to do. I don't know if it's overwhelming or not. Some sort of ritual for opening and closing, a Bitmoji classroom for every week while you're you're pretty. That's good. Following on Facebook. Yeah, that's true. You can get a Bitmoji classroom from people on there. So those are sort of a fun way to make your classroom engaging. I mean, think about how you have, usually we have seating areas in our classroom or working that you can do the rotation stations. Ryan mentioned the thing about having like places to go and have the kids socialize a little bit. I know a big one that I've seen online is a lot of teachers have all their reading materials that they, whether it's a library of readers or it's different materials. And can you develop in your online classroom, can you make a library link where the kids can click on it and there's sort of fun things in there they can read? You could even make like that one of their assignments, like every Tuesday, they have to go to the library for 20 minutes or something like that. Brain breaks, right? I'm looking at some good ideas on there. Think about like in your classroom, I think most of us, we always had like on one of the sideboards, always had the homework and the daily assignments or whatever. And so, you know, do you have the same thing in your classroom? This one, I was thinking, I liked this one. I can't remember where I got the parking lot. I think it was Edutopia had that one. Because you know how we always have the desk and the kids can come up to the desk and you have a chair next to the desk and we can help the kids, and we don't have that. I liked this one where the Edutopia, they suggested having like a parking lot on your site where it's just, I don't know, some sort of image, or if you have a Bitmoji classroom, you could probably come up with something cute for that. But that the kids can just post questions and that either you or other students can answer the questions. And someone mentioned that earlier about you, I forget who was asking, has Canvas and was looking for some type of forum. So yeah, just have the parking lot. You know how you do that where you put Post-its and you do it. So that's, before they leave, ask every single one if they have questions, right? So that's a way to do it. You have a place where they can just put those general questions. The other thing is, and Ryan sort of mentioned this, is, you know, I know a lot of teachers said in the spring that you had office hours, but like kids wouldn't show up. And maybe that you assign the kids an office hour, just like a 10-minute office hour where you say, hey, or 5 minutes, you just got to come in and I just want you to check in with me. So maybe if they're not coming, you sort of make it their homework one week that they have to, you know, one of your classes is just 5 minutes with every kid, or, you know, again, it depends on how many kids you have. The other thing we talked about is, and I'm looking great suggestions on there. Thank you for everyone who are putting that. Is those things where those short video tutorials, if you know kids are constantly asking the same question over and over, like how do I submit this or how do I find this, that you just make a video tutorial so you can refer them to the link. Oh, save the last 10 minutes for office hours. Yeah, there's some great ideas going in the chat. And like I said, we'll save the chat and post it because that's tons of good stuff. So another one that came up, which I think was probably the biggest one, and I see this, you know, I'm in all those teacher groups on Facebook, so I look at what everyone's saying, is how to build community. And again, Leslie Grant has tons of ideas. This is one though, and Catlin Tucker, you know, if you've been on here before, you know I love Catlin Tucker. It was talking about what's your persona going to be, because you know how like we're all sort of like in our classroom, we all have a persona, we're all like a certain way in the classroom, the kids just know you and they know how you are. Is looking at that is what's going to be your persona in the remote classroom, like what's going to make you that work, you know, like do you change your background every day, do you wear like different shirts every day with different messages, is it your bell ringer? So what makes you, because we all know that kids, you know, they may pick a language or whatever because their friends are in it or whatever, or they hear the teacher's really fun. So what are you going to do to still be fun, or, you know, fun or whatever with the kids? So I thought that one, the first one, the teacher persona, and the second one is Oh, I like that. A different greeting each day. That's cute. A different, like, you know, a lot of us know that we just engage our kids just by virtue of because we're just warm people. We're friendly. We have fun in class. And so Catlin, I think, was talking about these somehow, or sometimes in hers, about like every day you change one thing in your background and the kids have to guess or be the first one to notice or email you what you changed in the background. Or you send out a code word in advance and they have to listen for you to say the code word and be the first one to say that you said it. Or you give a riddle and sometime during class there's going to be an answer. Or every day you show your pet or something. But it was a way to sort of engage the kids non-academically, to give them something fun to look forward to in the class, because we do that so easily in person and it's so tough online. So I thought those first two were sort of fun. Those things that just make us, I thought was some fun things to do. Flippity spinners, yeah. Things like, you know, we think about how we always greet students at the door, or we have a song of the week playing as the kids enter. So, you know, do the same thing, that I have a welcome page or a daily message or a song that they can click on to listen to. Or the other thing was, since we're not going to see the kids every day, just send out, you know, if you have a quick hello, or send them a meme or a funny message or something with remind is a really easy one, just to remind the kids that, hey, I'm still your teacher and I'm still here even if I don't see you every day. But just that little thing to let them know that you know, that we care about them, because it's going to be tough for everybody. That's that social, and all of this is that social emotional piece about, you know, the academics will be here, but got to have the social emotion.
Based on how the conversation goes,
I'm gonna mute that. All right. Okay, just had to make sure I got everybody muted. Okay, tons of getting to know you activities. Silly Spanish memes, word of the day, save in the cloud, these getting to know you activities. And as you're doing those, I mean, it can be like, you know, I think we've done that 3 truths and a lie. Even if the kids do it, especially the low, you know, they come in the first day, they don't speak the language, 3 truths and a lie. Go ahead, let them do it in English, but then you can start using it to do some target language. Have everybody give a baby picture. Like, a lot of kids don't want to put their real picture up there because, you know, kids, even though they do it a zillion times on social media, for some reason they won't do it in the classroom. Have everybody bring in a baby picture and kids have to guess who it is, or bring in a picture of their pet, or it's pet, you know, it's show and tell pet day. And if you have a real pet, you can bring it, or, you know, something like that. This is really good. And this is totally from Carol Gobb and the, you know, the Fluency Matters and stuff like that, is for those first days of class. I mean, this is something that I always did with my students. Even now at Columbus State, I do it with the students, is they make a name card and they draw a couple things that they like on it. And so have all the kids do it, including level 1 kids. And just every day you pick 3 or 4 cards, or they could do slides if you're virtual. And the teacher uses that to just sort of introduce the kid to the class, ask some questions. Hey, do you remember who likes chocolate, or who ate pizza, or who lives here, or whatever. And then after you've done everyone's cards, however long it takes, you know, because everything takes longer remote, at the end of it, do like a Kahoot game in the target language, or even if it's in English, whatever, where you do a Kahoot over all the information that everybody just shared. So those are just really good ways to build some community, because community comes when the kids get to know you and get to know each other. And it's hard online. We really have to be intentional about it. I mentioned this one, I'm keeping an eye on the clock too. I mentioned this one the other day about the collaboration, and Ryan mentioned it too, is that we had talked about maybe like having pods where you have like 4 kids who are together the whole unit or the whole quarter. And so they develop their own relationship, and like let the kids ahead of time say, okay, you can tell me one person you want to be in a pod with, or, you know, or someone you absolutely refuse to be in a pod with. But again, and so they have the tools that we practice with them. Have the pod come up with a group name, icon, and slogan in the target language. And then they can have that as their avatar, or they can have that as their name on their homework, you know, whatever you want to do. But again, just those ways, because sometimes it's hard to build community with, you know, 30 kids on the screen. But maybe if they're in a group of 4, you can build community via the pods and stuff like that. So just some ideas of things that I've seen on different websites for that. Oh, the other thing I thought was really important. Hang on a second, my computer's gonna die. Hang on for a second. I have to plug in my computer. there we go, is that when you go into groups, that a lot of times kids struggle with how to work in a group. And so setting up things like, and I think we sort of know this, but it's probably even more important if they're going to be working on their own, like in a Google Doc or in a breakout room, is that every member of the group has a role. Everybody, they even had it where the kids have to write a contract about, this is what I will do when I'm in my breakout room, that there's norms. But basically, because you know how it is, you get the group and either one kid does all the work, or one kid doesn't do anything, or one kid feels left out because the other three kids know each other. So it really talks about practicing with the kids ahead of time. What does a good group look like? What does collaboration look like? Those are those soft skills that are going to come in handy for students their whole life. It's not just something that's going to work in our classroom. So some other things on there, personalization. Oh, I thought this one was fun, like doing a spirit day. You know how in school you have spirit days or spirit week for like the homecoming or whatever, but have spirit days online where the kids have to wear, today's blue day or today's PJ day or today's your favorite hat day or dress like a pirate day or something, I don't know, whatever. And the kids can either wear it to the online class, or if that doesn't work, they can just even take a picture of themselves, and the teacher has like a gallery where you can post it, even if the kids don't want their faces posted or something. So I just thought those are fun things to, if I was going through thinking about what are all the things that we do in a physical school, and what could it look like in a virtual school. And I see great ideas coming in the chat, so keep that up. I see great ones. All right, Ryan had gone on to his next slide about the norms, the consistency, the routines. This document I totally stole off Facebook. I saw it going around on the Facebook teacher groups, is that it was like a Q&A resource about what to do if you're struggling with virtual learning. And it was an open link, so I put it on here, and I like I said, I don't know whose it actually was, but it was things like, if your technology doesn't work, what do I do? If I can't figure out this, what do I do? And I thought it was really, really nice, because and it was good for parents too. It was just like, if this happens, what do I do? Versus saying, sorry, I couldn't come to class. It was funny. I think one of the things on there is, you are not excused from doing your work just because you have technical issues. This is what you need to do. So this was totally going around Facebook. So I just stole it the other day and put it up there. So kudos to whoever, oops, I just lost my screen. Kudos to whoever came up with that. I thought this one was interesting too. I came across this, and this is in the link up above, this Edutopia link, of having, how you have a school dress code, is, do you have a dress code for your virtual classroom? Like, you can't come to class in pajamas, or you can't wear a baseball cap, or do they have to show their face or whatever? So anyway, I thought that was sort of interesting. The other one about just how to actually interact in there. How to, one teacher was talking about how, like when the kids want to speak so they don't all jump in at once, is she has the students raise one finger if they're like responding to what you're talking about, and raise two fingers if they have like a different thing they need to talk about, or they have a question. Anyway, so a lot of typical norms. I put Leslie's link in there. And I just see great ideas. Keep going in the chat box, great ideas. The relevancy, engagement, rigor, clarity, I feel like we have focused so much on that this summer, that we have so many resources for that. I mean, we've talked about the UDL, we've talked about design to the edges, the buffet learning, so all the links to the summer series. Box number 6 had the UDL. This one was nice, this blog post, I forget who did it. She has some really nice things. It was Cult of Pedagogy, I think. Yeah, that's right there. Called a Pedagogy, about 9 ways online teaching will be different. It was a really good post, very straightforward. So I thought that would be helpful to see. The one thing, I know we've talked about this a bunch, is just remember that everything takes longer in remote education. So we really have to prioritize the learning for the quarter. We're never going to cover what we normally cover in a real classroom, in a physical classroom. So prioritize, and even if you're doing hybrid, or even if you're doing the 6 feet of distance 5 days a week, we still know nothing's going to go at the speed that it used to go. So really prioritize. And we've talked about this. I know I've said this a bunch, so you're probably like, we've heard this before, but whatever you're doing live or face-to-face, prioritize that. That's all the interaction, the interpersonal speaking, all those things that kids can't, that are so hard to do remote. So when face-to-face time is so precious, that we prioritize it. And then when they're asynchronous, that's where the kids can do the reading and the listening, and maybe they can do some writing or speaking or signing or vocab or grammar practice. So I've had this in several different handouts, but I think that's really important. Let's see here, keep going. The presence, communication, positive reinforcement, parent and caregiver. This, I think, and Ryan touched on it, but I want to point it out too, is I think, here was that same thing about what do I do if this happens or whatever. Here's the parking lot we talked about. I think a lot of you are probably figuring out, okay, this is how I'm going to communicate with parents, or your school has come up with it. This one, and this has come up a lot of times in the session about what am I going to do with it when a student who isn't working in the physical classroom, we all know what we do, but to have a plan of action ahead of time is when there is a student who's doing poorly and missing homework, I'm going to email the parents, but what else maybe specifically are you going to do? And I know the good thing about this fall is a lot of districts have this plan now because they know that's such an issue. The Hangout link. Okay, not sure what that Hangout link is, if that's for me or for Amy. Okay, so, but what's the strategy for these kids who aren't ever coming to class and they're never signing in? And again, that's something a teacher can deal with a little bit, but remember when we talked about tier 1, 2, and 3, that gets to a tier 3 activity that the school's gonna have to help you be involved. But the one thing I wanted to mention, and Ryan sort of alluded to it, and I think it's this one right down here, is that to remember about interacting and collaborating with our colleagues, because I know I miss it personally at ODE. And I know when we're remote, we miss it, is just that hangout, that, passing your friends in the hall or talking at lunch, or, having those, venting sessions or whatever you need to know. Is how are we going to do that, or how are you going to do that especially if you're all remote? I mean, I know, like I said, we struggle with it at ODE. We do a lot of daily meetings and stuff like that. But think of ways, how are we going to be able to get together and collaborate online, because it's going to be so hard to do virtually. Okay, that's sort of the Hangout link for ODE OFLA. Okay, I'm not sure what I see. Okay, I'm not sure. Nah, hopefully you can take care of that. So these are a lot, like I said, this is just a lot of ideas that I found online from different blogs, and Leslie Grant and Catlin Tucker. But I mean, like I said, we only have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything that anybody needs to share vocally? Like I said, today's really the last, if you weren't on earlier, today's the last official general session. Tomorrow is for beginning teachers, although anyone's willing to come, or I'm sorry, welcome to come. And then next week is when we have our big ODE 3-day thing, where we'll do some more world language things on that. But is there anything, any suggestions? Okay, Lisa has a good question. Any suggestions for getting high school students to check emails? Anyone? Because I don't know. I don't know. As a parent or as from an educator, I don't know. What do you guys do to get the high school kids to check emails? Anybody? CC the parent. Okay. CC the parent. That seems to be a good one. Middle schoolers, CC the parent. Make email a requirement. Ooh, Tara, good one. Make it worth points that you have to check, that's your homework every day. I like that. You got to get points. Schoology messages get checked more than emails. Okay, so maybe the online messages. It could be also that email, like we were talking about, how you have like a secret word or a secret riddle or something in class, that you put it in the email, and the only way for the kids to access it and get, if there's bonus points or like Tara said, with homework. Yeah, that with the kids who are falling behind, definitely get the parents in there, the advisory person, the administrator. And remember, if it gets like, it seems like it's beyond your control, that you definitely get the school involved with it. The emails work one way. We always look at theirs, but they never get ours. That's funny. Remind is good because they're more likely to check their texts. Oh, that's funny. Well, I have 2 computers. I have 2 computers going. So whoever just said that about that. So I'm I'm cheating. I got 2 computers. The other thing, I remember when we were talking about John Hattie, remember the guy who did all those studies, is that he had said that kids are much more willing to communicate via social media than email. So maybe if you do have a class, Twitter, I don't even know if kids even use Twitter anymore. They're tending more to Instagram. If you have a class Instagram, that's a place to put it, or if you have the feed on your classroom. So he said that was one big thing he found out, that the kids are much more likely to communicate via social media platforms than they are via email.
Kathy, I came across that as well. Email is a generational thing. The older generations are very comfortable with email, but the younger generation, it's an old clunky dinosaur to them. So in keeping with what you just said, anytime you can adapt to social media or some type of a chat function using, your Schoology chat, whatever, is much more accommodating to what your kids are most comfortable with.
Yeah.
It means you may have to go outside your comfort zone.
I'm cracking up reading how you're like, I send the kids a remind to go check their email. That's cracking me up. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other things we need to share? Like I said, I'll show that. Let me see if I still have this one. Like I said, next week. So like I said, today is the last like open one, and I'm going to miss you guys. I've like loved hanging out with you all summer. It's been so fun. So tomorrow is the beginning forum for beginning teachers. We'll pick up back in the middle of September sometime. We'll start doing some forums where we'll get, we'll sort of get the information from the trenches, what actually happened when you went back, what worked, what didn't work. But also just a reminder that next week, August 11th, 12th, and 13th is when we're doing our ODE 3-day event. It's all about remote teaching. So if you click all three of these links are the same link. It'll give you the schedule. Day 1 is general sessions. Day 2 and 3 are breakouts by world languages. So we'll have more world language thing just in case you still need a PD fix from that. But other than that, I think I'm good.
Kathy, do you want to share the sessions that you're doing, the breakout sessions?
Yeah, we're doing day 2. I'm doing one called Novice Remote Control, which is where it's going to be, what do we do with those novice low kids the first day of class, and it's similar to some of the stuff we did. And then the other one on day 2 is Fill Your Remote Toolbox, where this is the request someone, I think it was Doreen or Darlene, I forget who gave me this request, where we're just going to do breakout rooms, and we're going to have a Google Doc where everyone's just going to flood it with ideas like what we're doing in the chat box. We're just going to flood it. Yes, Kayla, there's CEUs, contact hours, everything will be recorded. It'll work the same way. So
then day 3, I'm doing 2 sessions, and Kathy's doing one more, I think. I'm doing a session on leveraging the reflexive learning cycle to increase interculturality and learner autonomy. And then for those many of you who are in schools or districts who have not yet implemented an Ohio Seal of Biliteracy program, now that seal has become one of the 12 official Ohio graduation seals and pathways to graduation, you or someone from your school may want to come and attend that presentation, which is about how to implement a Seal of Biliteracy program in your school or in your district.
Yeah, and then the third one on day 3 is actually not me. It's one on doing jigsaws. It's Liz Thomas from Walnut Hills. She's a Latin teacher in Walnut Hills, and she does a lot of jigsawing. And she does it on Schoology, but she has some great strategies for how you can do those jigsaw activities in any of your LMSs. So that's going to be the third one. Someone asked about the hours. It's basically the contact hour. I think the general sessions on day 1 are each an hour. And then the breakout sessions on days 2 and 3 are 90 minutes each. And so there'll be a Google form, the same thing where you'll get, I think it's 1.5 hours for each one. Cool. Okay. I think, all right. I feel like the mom saying, okay, you guys go out and do this. go. I'm actually looking forward to connecting with you all again in September and letting me know like, okay, this totally worked, this totally didn't work or whatever.
Kathy, in the meantime, we need to thank everyone for the hours, because I'm seeing names. I always look to see who's in the participant list, and I'm seeing names that I've seen with us all summer long for this series. And I'm thinking about the hours that teachers have given up of their own free will, of their summer vacations to, prepare for the coming school year. And I'm in awe. I think back to when I was a teacher and how valued that time off was in the summer. But these are extraordinary times and extraordinary circumstances. And, Ohio teachers are awesome. They are rising to the occasion. We see that in every one of these with people showing up time and time again, participating, sharing in the share box. It's just been awesome. And we really appreciate you for your willingness to do that.
Yeah, we were totaling the participants the other day. We had almost 2,000 participants from July 23rd or June 23rd when we did our first one until we figured by tomorrow. We have almost 2,000 teachers. So you guys are awesome. And like I said, we totally stole all the ideas from you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. But thank you so much. And do keep in touch with us. Let us know. I'm gonna stop recording here. Let us know what